Hey, I'm Rob Nelson, and this is Rob Nelson Live. So President Trump continues to say things that seem, a little out of touch with reality, that everything's fine. The virus is gone. And we all go, not really. But he wants to get the economy open. But again, he's sort of living in an alternate universe at times. And the woke liberals on the left go, Donald Trump is crazy. Donald Trump's insane. Donald Trump doesn't know what he's talking about. Anything Donald Trump has ever said, done, or thinks is wrong. Honestly, if the woke liberals, if Donald Trump just said everything is horrible, I think the woke liberals would be like, no, everything's fine. But the reality is that Donald Trump and the woke, ultra woke mob are exactly the same. And that's what tonight's show is all about. I'm Rob Nelson. This is Rob Nelson Live.
Meet Rob Nelson, talk show host.
Because you got the 70s thing going there. My name's Rob Nelson. I used to have a talk show on Fox, a show on Fox News. But news in America is so produced. I don't care if you think it's left, right, center, fake.
You passed tougher legislation to deal with the paparazzi after what happened with you and your family.
I think it's very important that we focus on rebuilding.
All right, everybody, welcome to the show. Rob Nelson Live. Let's get it heated up. Let's get it interactive. I want everybody to be part of this show. The whole beauty of what we're doing here is we're not left, we're not right, we're independent. We're not in the middle either, because the middle really isn't where everybody is. We're just not on one extreme. It's a big circle, and we're all going around in it. And this show is about just getting to the honest conversations, and you're all part of that honest conversations, as is my producer, Bruce Kraft, who is hiding in his studio out near Long Beach. Bruce, you there?
Yeah,
whoa,
Rob.
Check it out. Okay, this is a special event, everybody. This is Muscle Man Bruce. You will never see Bruce Kraft like this again in a video, because he's buttoned up, the tie, the geek, but he, for a special occasion, Bruce, what's going on here? You are like, you need a tan, buddy. You need to get out in the sun. Vitamin D cures the corona.
I had lunch outdoors today, but besides that, it's a nice day, but it's hot as hell. So there you go. And I never turned down a dare, and I'm putting this on blast.
Wow.
Rob, you dared me to do it, and I never turned down a dare. Just FYI. There you go.
Awesome, Bruce. Hopefully this raises our engagement, right? Because we are streaming. Let's just let people know real quick. We're streaming all over the place, right?
Yeah. So we have Instagram, ViewStub, Reddit, Twitch, YouTube, Facebook, Periscope, Twitter, everywhere. Yep.
Great. And listen, anybody on any of those platforms, we're seeing what you're saying. I don't always get to address it. Bruce sees them, puts as different ones on the screen. So, know that your comments are being seen and incorporated. Even if I don't say something, I'm trying to incorporate what's getting said to us. So love the interaction. Try to respond to all of it. And again, if you have our login link and come in, you can join in the conversation live with us, because we love that too.
Yeah, we got people already chiming in about how I'm looking, so yeah.
Oh, Bruce, that's awesome. we love how Bruce looks. It's all part of the show. All right, Bruce, I'm going to ask you to do me a favor.
Yeah.
There is someone that I would love to see if we could get him in on this with us in the stream.
Sure.
Okay. So I'm gonna forward you his contact, and if you'd send him the link to let him join in. He's a really interesting, did a lot of diversity coaching with the FBI, the CIA, and he's not literally going to be a guest, but he's gonna join in if you will make him part of the stream for us.
Cool, you got it.
Is that doable?
Yeah.
Okay, perfect. All right, everybody. So now it is time, and so taking a second, we're doing this live. But I want to have Milt be part of our conversation, because he's a really fascinating human being. And Bruce, if you'd give him this link and let him be part of it. All right.
Sure. Got it.
And everybody else out there, join in too. Okay, it's time. Let's start the monologue. All right. Here's the thing. I started out saying Trump and the woke media mob are the same. And the woke media mob, I call it all one thing, because the media is part of it. Most of the media is part of the woke thing. But I'll get to why they're the same, because you're going to go, no, they're totally different. And in fact, they're so the same, it's frightening. But let me back up first. Let me take this back a step and run through a couple things that happened this week. So 2 cops in Texas are shot and killed going to a domestic disturbance call. 2 cops in Washington State are shot. One is killed, the other injured. A traffic stop. If you follow the news, there's stories all week long of cops being shot, cops being killed, New York City cops being beaten up. That doesn't get much media play because we're in an anti-cop phase. But tonight's show is all about how our anti-this and anti-this is getting us nowhere. Why is there not more of an outcry when cops doing the right thing, making an effort to serve, to protect, get killed? Why isn't there outrage? Why isn't there massive media coverage? Why isn't there media coverage of all the kids, young people who get shot in urban neighborhoods? Why isn't there massive media coverage of the father walking his daughter across the street in New York City and he gets shot and killed? The only story like this that got much coverage was the 8-year-old girl in Atlanta at the Wendy's. And probably that's because the mayor of Atlanta said enough is enough. But we're not paying attention or putting a highlight on that because that's part of where our anti is today. We can't survive as an anti-cop culture. We need to reform the police. We need to make the police better. We need to go from the top down. You know, DA candidate for Los Angeles, George Garcon, was on the show a few weeks ago and said, it's in the training, the way officers are trained. It's a culture that comes from the top. But you're crazy if you don't want cops. I don't even like cops in general as a theory. I mean, I have friends who are cops. Don't get me wrong. I don't mean I dislike, but I don't like authority. I've had so many run-ins with cops, it's not funny. And I'm a white guy. But I get that police officers serve a really important function. And if you're nuts, if you actually think you'd be fine without it, you'll be fine without it till somebody F's your life up and you wish there was a cop there to help. Till you're in trouble. Till somebody's robbing you. Till somebody's coming after to assault you. Till there's a threat on you. Then you're, where are the cops? Where are the cops to come get this person? So you don't really want no cops. You want good cops. But we don't pay attention to all the stories of the good cops, the cops who do the right thing every day out there, taking risks, doing the right thing. And if we want police enforcement to work, it doesn't work by us dumping on all cops, making nobody want to be a cop and making nobody think it's worth being a good cop. We want to reinforce the positive stories of police officers doing the right thing, defusing, de-escalating, solving problems, taking risks, going into communities and trying to make a difference. That's what we want, but we're in the anti stage. Well, here's where the anti becomes a problem. I started out saying Donald Trump is, a little off the charts on what's real. Now, you criticize Donald Trump, you're in trouble, right? He ever sees this, he'll say horrible things about me. But that's okay. That's his personality. The reality is, I think Donald Trump did a lot of things right. And I think Donald Trump connected to a massive portion of the country when he got elected. Not who was a bunch of white supremacists, people who were fed up with the establishment. The establishment is what bothers people. And they wanted someone who would rock it. Somebody who would say, no, enough. Who would authentically go after it. Call everything out. And Trump did. Called everything out. Has he been wrong about things? Sure. He's also often right about things. And because from his election, we're in an anti-Trump mode, it's been one thing after another to get rid of Trump. So the anti-Trump is what triggered everything. First, Russia. We got to get rid of Trump through Russia. Couldn't do that. Couldn't impeach him. That didn't work. Find another thing and another thing and another thing. And you know what? The coronavirus came along. And I think a lot of Democrats were like, woohoo, we're finally going to get rid of Trump because the economy tanked. And remember how they would never talk about how media would never talk about how great the economy was under Trump, but they talk about how terrible it is now under Trump. Oh, Trump's economy's a wreck. Trump is it as if like he tanked the economy. He didn't tank the economy. The virus tanked the economy. And I don't care what anybody says to me. Any president would have faced a tanked economy. And any president would have faced incredibly difficult choices about whether and how to reopen it. The fact that, Trump's top medical advisor, who he's now a little on the outs with, Dr. Fauci, said 2 weeks before they declared everybody started shutting down here in California first, said it's fine. Go out on the streets. Go do your thing. Nancy Pelosi said, come to Chinatown. Oh, a week and a half later, they shut everything down and said Trump didn't act fast enough. It's like nobody knew. Nobody knew how to act fast enough. Trump acted as fast as he could, and he acted when his advisors told him to act. But the anti-Trump thing is about getting rid of Trump. And it's led to the point where we will do anything if you don't like Trump to get rid of him, including kind of hope this pandemic just keeps lasting a little longer so Trump can't go out and campaign. So here's where we get to the first example where the anti comes in. The anti-Trump led to the ultra woke. Because anything Trump does is bad. So anything Trump says or stands for is bad. The anti-Trump, the ultra woke, took a perspective that if he said it, it's wrong. So we get the virus. If I hear one more person say, we're following science, and even the Republican side says it, but Democrats are all like, well, we're opening and we're following science. It's like science has become this word like God. It's like, well, I'm listening to what God told me to do. That's what people do now. We're listening to what science, if science is this thing, this one thing, this one giant entity called science. Hey, listening to science. If you're listening to science, there's all kinds of things. There is a virus, highly, highly, highly spreadable out there called the COVID-19. Science also tells you certain other things about that virus. Science tells you that children, young people, people under 20 who are healthy, literally have an almost 0% chance of dying. It's like 0.00001 or something. That doesn't change how most people behave. They're terrified their kids are going to get it. I understand why. But who wouldn't be? Media's gotten you frenzied about it. A lot on the left have gotten you frenzied about it. And I'm not making this about left and right, in my opinion. I'm just saying that's where that came from. And so, yeah, you're terrified for your kids. There's some science would tell you don't be. Science would tell you healthy young people have nothing to fear. Some will get it and die, yes. Not many. Some will get anything and die. Some will get it and have bad complications. Yes, not many. This is a bad disease, but there is no cure yet for this disease. And the notion that you can keep a nation locked down indefinitely is absurd. California just shut down. I said 4 months ago when this all started, they are lying to us because they don't know. I think they do. It makes no sense to lock everything down, keep everybody from getting it, and then let everybody out in 3 months when you still don't have a cure, because you'll start it all over again, which is what's happening. More and more people are getting it because you're letting people out. And if you shut it all down, you're going to be in the same boat 2 months from now, and 3 months from now, and 6 months from now, and until there's a vaccine. And by the way, 40% of people say they won't take the vaccine. So what happens then? Got a whole country of people, I won't take it, I ain't taking it. So then it's going to keep spreading. So my point is, at some point, science is telling you can't win this thing by just locking everything down. Science is also telling you that the death rate is dropping, depending on the age range. Science also told us that 40% of the deaths were in nursing homes. I don't know what that's like, 70, 80% of the deaths are people over 70. I'm not saying that's good. I'm saying at a certain point, that's science too. Science also tells you it's a spreadable disease, so wear a mask. But because we're in this all or nothing anti, you've got the other side, people going in places and refusing to wear masks. There was a guy who went in a store, refused to wear a mask in Michigan this week. And an older man said, put a mask on. The store said, please leave the store without a mask. He stabbed the guy. And then he ran down and he charged the 2 police officers trying to apprehend him, and one police officer, and ran at her with 2 knives, and she shot him, and he kept running, and she shot him and killed him over not wearing a mask. I think people are obsessed to a point that's not healthy with trying to stay hidden. Like, we've got to live our lives. But you can wear a mask especially when you're in a place where other people want you to. It's not going to make your life that hard. And you don't have to go in a Target and refuse to wear a mask. But that's the other side of the ante. Like, I refuse. Trump finally wore a mask. I get why Trump didn't want to wear a mask. It wasn't just his ego. It looks like weird to have the president wearing a mask. But okay. There's times and places. But again, the ante is a response to the ante. Antebellum, the country band, changed their name to Lady A. And they had a whole thing about how they did it because they were, had not realized the connection of antebellum, the antebellum South, to racism and slavery and so they changed their name. Okay, first of all, I don't know how they realized the connection. They just got after the BLM stuff. Just got the memo. The antebellum kind of connects to the South and plantations and slavery. But okay, either way, they decided to become Lady A. very politically correct of them. Until the original Lady A, who's a blues singer in California, like 60s, maybe early 70s, not famous, said, but I got in a thing with them, and now they're suing her to enforce their trademark. And they're saying, well, they're suing her because she wanted money if they kept using the name. Quite an interesting dilemma, right? You've gone on about how you were changing your name because of the connections to something a long time ago in the antebellum South. And suddenly you're face to face with a real person who's a black woman, who's a singer, who's not famous, who, by the way, is a blues singer, which is the basis and the roots of your country music. And because she won't go with your trademark thing to be Lady A and wants some money for it, you're going to sue her. That looks great. How the optics on that? But again, it goes back to my point. People, when it costs them something, they ain't in anymore. And the problem with being the all anti, the woke mob is that you inevitably trip yourself up because you can't ever be woke enough. And you start being like Donald Trump on the other side. You just say and do absurd things. You cancel anyone and everything. You start randomly tearing down a statue of this, that. Lincoln's statue has to go. Lincoln wasn't a racist, but I've said it before. Lincoln was okay with slavery for a while, and he would have been okay with it if the Union had held together through it. But he did also emancipate the slaves. But Lincoln's got to go. Washington's got to go. Every statue that represents anything has to go. That's where you get the illogic of the woke. So this comes back to Bari Weiss, who's a New York Times editorial editor, part of their board until a couple of days ago. Bari Weiss is a centrist. She's not ultra conservative. She's more conservative than liberal, but she's a centrist. And Bari Weiss left the Wall Street Journal to go to the New York Times after Trump got elected. And Bari Weiss did this, she said, because the New York Times realized after the election, remember right after the election when a whole lot of in the media said, I guess we missed something, like we missed something that was going on in the country. We missed where people were, and we want to capture that. We want to reflect that. And so in an effort to do that, places like the New York Times said, let's bring in some people who are a little more conservative. Let's expand. Let's get different voices. Bari Weiss was one of those. Bari Weiss resigned from the New York Times this week and wrote the most eloquent and scathing letter. Eloquent because she framed the stuff I'm talking about in a way I never could, so gracefully. I stumble my way through it. I'm like a bull in a china shop. And scathing because it was an indictment of the woke mob like you've never seen. She basically said, and you can go read the actual letter, that being at the New York Times and being a centrist was dangerous, not to her safety. Dangerous meaning she was getting beat down over and over internally on Slack and internal stuff. People being racist to her, being hostile to her. She's Jewish, saying, oh, you're going to go write about the Jews again? Putting her down, demeaning her for not having the right views. And she said the New York Times has become a stifling environment where the narrative, where she's a journalist used to write the first rough draft of history. And now history has just become another piece in their narrative. And it has to fit their narrative or it goes. History is no longer telling you what's happening. The narrative tells you what history you're going to tell as true. And she said, if you even try to do something or say something that doesn't fit that narrow thing, you'll be fired. You'll be battered. If your editor says you can do it, don't believe them because they will ultimately turn on you. And she said it's an environment where young journalists are no longer being fostered to seek the truth, but merely to tell the approved ideology. And that the press has become, in her eyes, no longer a vehicle to give people information to make choices, but a means in which an enlightened few, by their own admission enlightened, think they have the answers that we need to hear. That is woke mob defined, except the mob isn't necessarily enlightened. They just follow along thinking they have the answers, like a bunch of religious fanatics. And the irony that the left, who hates the religious fanatics they used to pick on the right, have become those fanatics, except instead of using the word God, they use the word science, which simply means God. It's not about what actual facts are. It just means we're using that word. Whatever their phrase or thing is, Black Lives Matter. Black lives do matter. but it's now just used. It's just another thing that the woke mob uses and throws everywhere. So every action will be a racist action. Every white person will inherently have white privilege and use it. Every cop, even the good cops, somehow are associated with cops are bad cops, so we want no cops. And every opinion not approved by the heresy, is heresy, not approved as a tenet, almost like the old Catholic Church back in the days, when they went after everybody a couple hundred years ago, not now. You were a heretic if you didn't believe it, if you didn't say it. Well, that's what we become. If you don't think or say the right orthodoxy thing, right, you're a heretic. Oddly, it was science that was heresy hundreds of years ago against God. Now science has become the God. And I'm not saying science isn't important or good. I'm saying science isn't a thing like God that you just say science and it's one thing. Science is all kinds of data and facts and things. And you take that data and how you choose to interpret it and use it becomes important. Anyone can choose and pick the piece of the data they want and make an argument for it. So science isn't one thing. There are simply elements of science that are unchangeable until we discover new ones, right? And those physics and scientific laws often do change and adapt. But when you look at the science around this virus, there are things that are true about how it spreads, about what it does to people. And there are things that are also true about who it does that to most likely. There is a science, and there's a health issue, and I'm going to wrap this up around the health issue, because there is a mental cost, which I'm going to talk about in my Friday show, by the way, with some doctors. There's a mental cost to being trapped, to being shut down. In Los Angeles, people are depressed, they're discouraged, they're broken. Their hearts are out of them, and they're scared. And the more we keep shutting down, the more that fear just piles on and piles on and piles on and piles on. Yes, there's a disease, but you don't want the cure to be worse than the disease. And that is not just a stupid catchline. So Elvis Presley's grandson committed suicide. Kind of hidden. He was a musician, had a big deal 10 years ago, but kind of stayed out of the light. Looks just like Elvis. Shot himself with a shotgun, 27 years old. You hear about the celebrity suicides. The Army's Captain America, Master Sergeant, 6 tours of duty, killed himself. They called him the Captain America. He was a Green Beret. He was like this upbeat, out there for everyone. America's soldier. Killed himself this week. Powerful, strong people are killing themselves. Weak people are killing themselves. People are mentally beaten down. There's science in that too. There's a science that says we need to engage, socialize, and we have to find a way to do it. But if you're on one extreme or the other, there can't be a way. There can't be a way that we can actually live and function in the virus until it's gone, because that would be agreeing with Trump. We can move forward. So people say we'll move forward, but we're not moving forward. In California, we're frozen in place. How long can we freeze in place? Black Lives Matter. Again, they do. But if it's an all or nothing thing, we're going to keep race relations frozen in place, and they'll get worse. We won't solve the problem. So my point is, the woke mob is doing what Donald Trump, that they hate that Donald Trump does. Sort of just sticking to something, doubling down on it, saying it whether it's true or not. And then Trump just does it more. Neither side will get anywhere with that. The whole point is to find a way to work in between that. And you can't do that when you're sitting in one camp or the other. All right, Bruce, we got some guests. We got some people calling in. We may have some comments, right?
Yep.
I could talk forever, but I think it's time to let the audience be part of it, right?
Sure thing. So we have Jim, Phil, Mike, and Milton.
Awesome. All right.
I'll bring Mike on first.
Okay, Mike. And by the way, if there's comments from Reddit or Instagram or whatever, Bruce, that you want to throw them in there. Hi, Mike.
Hi, how you doing?
Good. Are we just hearing you? We're not seeing you, or are we supposed to see you too?
You can see me. I just I'll hit the cam. How's that?
Yeah, hit that camera. Let us see you. You know, unless you want to keep your identity hidden from view.
Well, I'm not sure what's happening here. I'm on my phone, and
Okay. Well, that's all right. So we'll go with your audio for now. All right. So you just have to tell us a little about yourself. What's your thoughts? You've been listening. So are you white, black, left, right, in the middle?
I am male, white. I was a detective with LAPD for 25 years.
Okay.
I am currently an educator. I've been teaching for the last 15 years, and I teach high school. I teach government and sociology. And I just would like to say that you're right. Everybody's polarized, and you cannot enlighten or bring light to a situation if you take darkness and add more darkness. Somebody just has to give a little bit, and it doesn't seem like we're having any kind of dialogue in this country right now.
Yeah, and you know, it's interesting, Mike, because, you know, I don't know if you can see, but you're a big black square on the screen, and it's a perfect example. Like, and I love that we're just getting your voice still, but it's kind of like, you know, I want to see you. I want to cast light onto that so we can see you. And it's the same with the thing. Like, you know, it's like, it brings clarity. You know, I like the night. I like darkness. But in reality, it's an interesting point that we need light to get things. So let me ask you something real quick. As a former LAPD.
Rob, I think I'm losing you.
You're losing us?
I lost whatever you just said.
That's all right. So as a former LAPD, can you hear me now?
Yeah.
As a former LAPD, where do you come down in a nutshell on the police issue? Obviously, you know, did you saw bad behavior from, you know, in gangs and, you know, obviously in homicides, that kind of thing. Did you see bad behavior on the police force too?
I arrested a couple of cops over the course of my career. So the answer to that would be yes. It's this whole all cops are bad, you know, that whole mentality is as ridiculous as I was off duty and I was robbed by a black man one time, so all blacks are bandits, right? I mean, yeah, there are cops that do bad things. I saw the tape of the Wisconsin issue, and or is it Minnesota issue?
Yeah,
and that was disgusting to me. Do I think every cop in Minnesota is a racist or would put their knee on somebody's neck? No, I don't. Not by a long way.
Right. Let me ask you something, Mike. Do you think, and I don't want to turn this into a whole thing on police, but do you think that there is, I've said before, I sometimes wonder if, because there's a lot of crime in urban neighborhoods and whatever, that, and this is not defending cops who are pull over every time they see a black guy in a nice car or whatever, and I've heard too many stories of that from people who are, you know, more affluent or well-off blacks. But that there could be an almost inherent bias because you're used to dealing with crime in a lot of black neighborhoods. So you tend to prejudge a black guy. You tend to assume he's going to, you know, he's going to cause problems or something. And that instinct is there more than with white people, sort of subconsciously.
Well,
did you ever experience that?
That would be to assume that my partner sitting next to me was not a black man. The idea that it's based on color is ridiculous. It I think can be summed up in this way. I was working South Central Los Angeles in black and white at one point, and I was probably the only white face for about 5 miles. I pull a guy over, and the first thing out of his mouth is, "You only pulled me over because I'm black." My response to him was, "No, I didn't pull you over because you're black. I pulled you over because you can't drive for shit." The bottom line is, there is a tendency to jump right to that conclusion. Did I see behavior that was like that? No, I don't even think I saw it in my early career. So you can't pull somebody over for just driving while black. I mean, that's stupid.
But Mike, I think, Mike, let me interrupt you. I think people do, though. I mean, the reality is, I've often asked people on the street, I've asked black people on the street, would you rather be black or white driving in a car? And everybody says white. And I agree. Like, you are better off to be white driving in a car.
I personally don't believe that's true, but
Rob, real quick, Mike, I'm gonna bring another guest. We have Milton on.
Pop him in.
He's a black individual, and I think it's gonna be great to bring you guys on.
Pop him in. Hi, Milton.
Hey, Rob, how you doing, brother?
Good. Milton, I know a little about Milton. So, Mike, let me just say, Milton is a guy who's worked. Milton, you can tell yourself, but done a lot of diversity training with police officers, with the FBI. So why don't you engage with Mike in this conversation? Because you actually bring a perspective that I think is.
I think first of all, let's understand something, guys. The way the human brain works is that people have biases, and it doesn't make you a bad person. For example, okay, just to give you an example of what I mean, okay, I happen to be 6'7". I am by trade a professional speaker, okay? Does me being 6'7" help me as a speaker? Absolutely, okay? One of the things we know about America is, Mike, right now in America, only 15% of all males in America, no matter what race, are over 6'2". However, if you look at CEOs and presidents of Fortune 500 corporations, 60% of them are over 6 feet. So even though only 15% of the population, male, is over 6 foot, 65% of all of the CEOs and presidents are. And I don't think somebody wrote down, well, let's look for the guy who's 6 feet. No, what we do is we say, okay, well, this guy looks like a leader. And sometimes we'll look at someone who is short and we'll say, well, you know, he's probably got that Napoleonic complex. There are people who are 5'7" who are great leaders, okay? But we sometimes will put people into a box, okay? And here's the one thing I wanted to say is this. Yeah.
Milton, do you think, though, that again, I want to be clear so people watching know, you have done a lot of diversity training with law enforcement, right?
Yeah, mainly with the FBI and the CIA.
Right. Okay. So, Mike, I think that's important just for you to note in the conversation. Do you, Milton, think that what Mike and I are talking about, do you think that there is some kind, why do so many people feel like, even me as a white guy, that black people are more likely to be unfairly targeted? And Mike, by the way, I get you're saying you had a black partner, and I'm not saying all police officers, but I do feel like I get treated better by cops than my black equal.
Well, I think it happens. Very honestly, Rob, it does. I mean, I remember once I was actually, I'm a professional speaker. I was going from Atlanta, Georgia. I was on I-20 driving over to Alabama to speak, and the person who invited me to speak was the sheriff of a county there, okay, near Anniston, Alabama. And so I'm driving, and I confess, Mike, I was speeding, okay? At the time, I was a younger man. I was driving a red Porsche 944, and I don't know what it is, but something about Porsches, they just go faster than you think they're going. And I was speeding, and I was 10 miles away from my exit, and an officer pulled me over. I pulled over. I remember very clearly, I pulled under an underpass, okay? And the officer came up to the car, and he says to me, he said, well, he said, you know, you were speeding? I said, yes, sir. I was going about 9 miles over the speed limit. Okay. He said, I think you may have been going more. And I said, I don't think so. I said, I was watching. I said, I knew I was speeding. I was going. And the reason I was speeding is because my wife had just given birth to my first child that night before. I was going to cancel my engagement speaking there, but the mayor said, you know, look, we got 3,000 kids coming for you to speak to, so we need you to come. And so I left my wife at the hospital. I run, shower, change clothes, and I drive over to Alabama, and I'm speeding, okay? Cop pulls me over. I have the letter from the sheriff inviting me to speak, and so I go into my pocket and hand him the letter, showing him the letter, not because I wanted him to not write me a ticket. I want him to write it and hurry up so I can get to where I'm going and be there on time, okay? I want him to know I was telling the truth, okay? And he then says to me, well, look, he said, if the sheriff is not driving that car, I don't give a damn. I said, okay, well, that's fine, sir. Just write the ticket. I need to go. I don't want to be too late. They got kids waiting. I don't want to be late. Okay, so I'm ready to go. And so then the officer tells me to assume the position, which I'm trying to figure out, why am I assuming a position for going 9 miles over the speed limit? But I grew up on the south side of Chicago, and my daddy gave me the talk. And the talk, when a black father gives a young black man the talk, it's not the talk about sex. It's the talk about how to deal with cops if they pull you over, no matter what color the cop is, okay?
Okay, so Milton, let me interrupt you because I want to get a lot of voices in here. Mike, so, hearing Milton's story, again, does that make sense? Again, I know it's one story, but like typically you don't need to have a guy like assume the position in that scenario, right? So is that just an isolated incident in your view? Or, I mean, we hear so many of them. And again, I know we're getting a lot in the cop thing, but I want to try to get cops and race in this. Go ahead.
It certainly can happen that way, and I can't speak for the cop because I didn't see what he saw. But I will tell you this, that it goes the other way as well. I saw a car one night about 2:30 in the morning, bars are just let out. This guy's weaving between two lanes. I wondered if he was drunk. Tinted windows, I couldn't tell who was in the car. I walk up and the first thing out of his mouth, you only stopped me because of black. Well, the problem with that scenario is I couldn't even tell what race he was till I walked up on the car. I stopped him because he was weaving between the lanes. I talked to him for a couple of minutes. When I figured out he wasn't drunk, just tired, I told him to get a cup of coffee and be careful going home.
Right. Well, I guess the point in this, and thank you both. You guys, I'm going to bring some other people on. You guys can stay with us and maybe jump back in if you have comments. Just let Bruce know if you're really aching to get something said. So like if you're like, I really, wave your hand at Bruce or whatever, like I really want to jump in on that, and Bruce can pop you in and out. Best way to kind of keep the dialogue going. Just want to throw a couple other people up. Bruce, let's toss another caller on. Who we got there?
Jim, can you hear us? Jim, you there?
Yeah, I'm here.
There you go. You're on live with Rob.
Oh,
hey, Jim.
Hey, Rob. How you doing? Good. Hey,
Once again, we don't have a video on you. We're just, for some reason, it seems like you guys on phones, we're just getting you. Activate your camera if you can, but.
Well, I apologize. I'm walking on the beach. It's pitch black, so.
Oh, okay. Well, we're not even getting that. But go ahead, Jim. Give us your thoughts.
Well, I was going to say something else. What you started on with your dialogue, which was terrific. But to just follow up a little bit on the last two speakers, to me, the bigger picture is, and I think I probably have shared this before. What is the net effect, of this new narrative? And I think Mike's point, which I really appreciate, is we now have a narrative where literally every time someone from a protected class, and I don't even want to just say it's an African American, right? I mean, anytime anybody from a protected class is not hired, fired, pulled over, not given a promotion, it's always defaults to its race, it's sexist. And I think that society needs, like, if we were a bunch of fathers, we would never raise our children that way. If our kids were short, slow, and fat, right, we wouldn't say, oh, you didn't make the baseball team, just because you're short, slow, and fat.
Right.
We'd say, get your ass out there and start working harder, and you don't have to be fat. Now, I get it, you can't change your race, but you still intuitively, as a father, would not preach excusism or victimization to your children, because at the end of the day, none of that matters. What matters is that the kid has to work harder than the next guy, because there might be, or there is, bias. There is implied racism, whatever the term might be. No one's going to deny that. I mean, it's been here forever. It's going to be here forever. I think it's less than it used to be, but it's still here. So my concern is that we are now, the narrative is, if you're a poor black kid, the only reason you're not the CEO is because you're black. If you're a poor white kid, it's because you're lazy, you didn't go to school, you didn't do your homework, and you got in trouble when you were a kid. And no one gives a shit about that kid, right? But if you're a minority or protected class, you have this like get out of jail free golden ticket, that the only reason your life is the way it is because you're black, or you're, whatever it might be, And
right.
I think overall that's not healthy to the development of an individual,
All right. Milton's still out there. Milton, jump in on this. Let me hear your thoughts on what Jim just said.
Feeling on that is this, that it's not a golden ticket by any stretch of the imagination, okay? Now, one of the things I want to say is this. You can never solve groupism. Stereotyping is about grouping. You can't solve groupism with more groupism. All cops are not bad cops, okay? I've worked with too many cops, okay? And I can't say to you, I want you to think that everybody black could make it to be the president of a company if they weren't black, because that's not true. They may not have the skills or the talent for it, okay? But I do know that there are people who have not been given opportunities for different reasons. It may be their race. It may be because their race is white. I don't know, but there are
But
things that we do.
what about Jim? What about what Jim's saying? Mike, jump back in here with us. I know we have two black screens. That's fine. No, but quickly, what about what Jim's saying? That there does seem to be almost like it's because I'm black. It's like, you know, it's sort of like that is this narrative that it's become. Because you're black, you didn't get it. And, you know, we've reinforced that with the whole, again, I'm in favor of, I see systemic racism. I see economic inequality that I think is underlying that this whole protest movement has led to. But I also see that it's reached an extreme where there's sort of a position where it's like all white people are somehow, you know, somehow doing something wrong. And all kinds of white people put up their black squares and go, you know, I'm sorry for my white privilege. I'm sorry that I didn't see or think this. And I'm kind of like, what?
I think that it's a matter of, again, you can't solve groupism with groupism. It's never all white. It's never all black. It's never all anything. Okay. I think we have to start dealing with the individuals. Okay. We have to start, and the reality is, though, you got to understand that there are some things that do happen, and they are racial. I remember when I got out of college, I took a job where I was the first African American manager in the department I was in with the company I was in. And after I'd been on the job, maybe about 2 months, my supervisor called me and said he wanted to have a talk with me so I could understand some things. I thought he was going to tell me how great a job I was doing because I knew I was busting my ass staying there later than anybody else. Mm-hmm. He instead wanted to tell me, he said, you know, he says, I saw in your information you're from Chicago. I was down in Fort Lauderdale, Florida. He said, I want you to know I can't stand no damn Yankees. I think y'all should stay up north where you came from. That didn't bother me because in my mind, Yankees were whites from up north, not blacks, okay? I'm from Chicago. Most black people in Chicago are from originally Mississippi. I call Chicago Mississippi North, okay? And so then he said, and second thing, he said, I don't like college hires. You don't know your head with a hole in the ground. Okay, that's his problem, his issue. Then he pulled out an identification card for the Royal Knights of the Ku Klux Klan. He said, and this tells you I don't like people your color. So I'm just going to tell you now, if I were you, I wouldn't unpack too much of my stuff. I'm going to send you a black A back to Chicago as soon as I can. Now, was everybody like that? No, because that was him. That was him. He was a racist.
That's one person is a racist. And there are plenty of racists.
But what that said to me was, to the gentleman who's walking the beach right now, what that said to me was I had to get to know his boss so I could work around him. And I got to know his secretary so I could work around him. And so I had to build my strategies. Like you talk about work harder, I had to build my strategies on how to avoid him, okay?
And you're saying because you were black, you had to do that?
No, because I don't care what color I was. If you have a boss who has some kind of disdain for you, no matter who you are, because there were some white guys he didn't like either. He just told me that mine was because I was from the north, because I was a college hire, and because I was black.
But we can't deny, Mike, I wish I could see you guys. It's killing me. Mike, when you look at Milton, right? Can you hear me, Mike? Can you see him? Can you see him?
Yeah.
Okay.
No, I can't.
What's the first thing you see when you look at Milton?
Milton seems like a nice guy. He's wearing glasses just like I've got.
Okay.
The one thing that I would like to say, though, and I really appreciate this about what Milton's saying, is the fact that he talks about groupism, and groupism won't work. We as people are lazy. We want to be able to look at somebody and put them in a little box. And you've got to really work at accepting people for what they're giving you right now. Okay? Yeah. So what I mean by that is if you're talking to somebody and they come across, I don't care what color they are, if they're coming across like they want to hurt me, guess what? we're going to be at odds.
You're going to prepare to defend yourself.
So
exactly.
Well, yeah, but here's the dilemma as I see it, you guys. So, Mike, when I say what's the first thing you see when you look at Milton, you say, looks like a nice guy. I feel like, and I don't want to say like you're lying. I think that's what your brain's telling you see. But the reality is you see a black man, and there's nothing wrong with that. Milton knows that the first thing people see when they see him is a 6'7" black guy. That's not a positive or a negative judgment. It's the same way You know, you see a woman, you go, I see a woman. You see a child, you go, I see a child. We see physical first. So, and I don't think that's a bad thing. But right, Milton,
No, it's not.
you see a black guy, but when I ask you, you say I see a nice guy because you don't want to say the first thing I see is a black guy. But I don't think
No,
that's a
no, I think he said that he saw a nice guy because he's heard me talk. What happens is I think that
don't
the
we
way
see color? We see color, and there's nothing
yes,
wrong
we
with
do. But now that he's heard me talk and he's agreed with some of the things I've said, he's taken me off of that list and now he sees the individual. And that's what we have to get to do is get to see the individual as opposed to seeing the group.
that. Uh-huh.
But
And the
our
group,
tendency, and what Mike said to you is very right. Mike said, you know, when people are lazy, that's the way the brain works. You have the conscious mind, the subconscious mind. The conscious level, you only think of one thing at a time. But your subconscious is everything you've ever heard, ever seen, experienced. And you see someone or you see something, your brain says, or you see how somebody's driving, Mike, if you're a cop and you see how somebody's driving in front of you, your brain says, have I seen something like this before? And your subconscious says, yes. And then your conscious mind says, what is this leading me to? Your subconscious says, well, that may be a drunk driver or a distracted driver
Exactly.
because they're weaving. Okay, does that sound about right, Mike?
That's
And
exactly right.
and your brain does that when you look at people as well, okay?
Sure.
And
yeah,
it's just, and what happens though, once we start talking to people and start interacting with them as human beings, as an individual to
yeah,
another individual,
I
then we
agree.
see the person.
I agree. But going back to something Jim said before about feeling like, you know, people go, okay, well, it's, you know, it's a white guy, it's because he's lazy. A black guy, he goes, well, it's because I'm black. And Jim, this is kind of pointing back to you a little. I think the reality is, and again, I am not in the camp of like, I think it's clear from what I said before, I am not in the camp that we should be in one extreme or the other on this. But I am aware that most white people, and I don't know if this is true for you, Mike, you're a cop, I think, or an ex-cop, whatever. I think it's a different experience because you're engaged in a different way with it, especially, you know, if you were dealing with a lot of violent crime and a lot of, you know, I'm guessing it involved gangs at times, whatever. But
Los Angeles involved
yeah,
murder and gang.
right, exactly. But for most people, most white people I know, when they are not racist people, they walk down the street, they see a tall black guy, they have a uh-oh moment. They often cross the street, they move away, they look weird. They don't do it when they see a tall white guy. I don't know what that's about, but most white people will admit to doing it. And Jim, that's where I think at some level your point going, someone says it's because I'm black, but I think there is sometimes a bias. And I'm not saying it's always negative, but that's a negative thing. And every tall black guy I know says they have that experience with white people. Every one of them.
Well,
And I tell you, I think, but Jim, I think,
I'll just jump
go
in.
ahead,
Just
Jim.
keep the conversation moving.
Go ahead, Jim.
All right, go ahead, Milton. Jim, we were letting you talk if you wanted. Maybe he's trying. We can't hear him on the beach.
I think we lost Jim somehow. I
right.
want to just say that I teach at a Title I school, so I have a lot of kids that are in my classes that are both black, white, Hispanic, and these kids show individual promise. And some of them, I don't care what their color is, are very bright. Some of them are, struggling a little harder than others.
Right.
And I have a sign on my door that says the same hot water that hardens the egg softens the potato. It's not the situation you're in, it's what you're made of. And I really honestly believe that's true.
And I think you're right.
A bad hand and turn it into a great winning situation.
Yeah, and
I agree.
Yeah, Jim, are you back with that?
Yeah, can you hear me, Rob?
Yeah, go ahead. We wanted to let you
Okay.
get your thoughts in on what I was saying.
Yeah, sure. So I was saying I really appreciate.
And Jim, by the way, you've said before, come on the show and as called in and said before, you admit that you sort of you worked in a trailer park for a long time and you did form assumptions that you were like, this is behavior I saw that mostly was coming from black people, and you formed assumptions based on that.
Right. I think the example I gave was the concept of a prejudice versus a racist, thought, which I don't want to go into all that right now. But what I would like to ask Milton is if the 4 of us, 5 of us, if 50 of us sat down and we said, what's the purpose of this exercise? And we all agreed the purpose of the exercise was to figure out how do we make a substantive, difference in the lives of, poor, disadvantaged African American, kids, we'd take a whiteboard and we'd put 20 things on it, right? And then we'd prioritize them. And what I would like to get some thoughts from Milton on is, to me, the idea that a black guy gets pulled over or gets treated through systemic racism or through blatant racism is not, in my humble opinion, and I'm no expert, but I don't think it's a top 5 reason that these inner cities and that these families are dysfunctional and that there's so little hope in these communities. And every time we keep talking about, I got pulled over, everyone's a racist, cops are this, whatever, all we're doing is delaying the conversation that has to be had, which is what are the number 1, the number 2, the number 3 things that we better address.
So, okay, Jim, let me interrupt you. I got to keep you guys going a little faster. So, Milton, real quickly, just like 20 seconds, address what Jim is saying and particularly answer, is it valid, the point he's making, that that the fact that we're pulling over black guys too much or, whatever, is not important? There are obviously more critical issues.
It's important. It's important, but I think what I hear Jim saying is that the first thing we ought to address. And I would say, no, the first thing, Jim, we need to address is a whole achievement gap in terms of education, okay? And we have got to start getting folks a chance to look at education, okay? And you got to understand that a lot of the problems with education go way, way back. This is not new. Jim, there was a time, I'm sure you're aware of this, Jim, but there was a time in America and most of our southern states, it was against the law to teach someone black to read. Punishable by public whipping with a whip or cat of nine tails, okay? And if you continued, it was then punishable by cutting your tongue out. So there was a punishment for that, for teaching blacks to read, because a lot of the slave masters, and right after slavery, during Jim Crow, a lot of folks said, the most dangerous creature on earth is an educated black man. That's not something that Black Lives Matter started saying as a slogan. No, that's what slave masters said during slavery, is that an educated black male slave is a very dangerous creature.
But Milton and Mike and everybody, I need you guys to go quicker with your responses, just because we're running out of time. And what you're all saying is really important. But you're right about that. But what a lot of people react to is that's a history and we can't forget it. But that's not where we are today, and that's where a lot of white people push back.
No, we still have an education gap today. We still have an achievement gap in education. That's why I said we have to deal with education.
Yeah, absolutely. But I'm saying that fact that there is going to be 100 examples of how black people were oppressed because they were enslaved, and that some of that has carried over. But what we're seeing now, I'm afraid we're seeing a race divide that is going to become unclosable if we don't do something.
I think when I teach diversity, Rob, the first thing I do is I teach how do we communicate with each other across that racial divide. Because if we can't communicate with each other, the rest of it is messed up.
Milton, put your face back in the camera. Yeah, go ahead, jump in.
Because when I was a kid, I lived in Orange County, California. I didn't know a black person until I got to high school. That's how racially divided it was, even in California. It wasn't the South, other than the fact that it's Southern California. But what I'm saying is, I didn't even know a black person until I got to high school. So people tend to freeze up when that comes. But what I think was enlightening to me was the fact that I learned that they were just like me from being around them. And the more we mix, the more we get to that understanding. And to your point that the most dangerous man is a educated black man, I beg to differ. I think two of the smartest educated black men that I've read were absolutely wonderful, and that's Dr. Martin Luther King and Nelson Mandela. Both of them are peace activists and extremely loving and bringing it all together. So, as far as I can say, I think that educated black men are needed.
I agree.
and Milton, I'm sure would agree with that. I think there's, and I get. So look, there's so much to unpack in all this, and we're kind of at the end, and I love what you all have said. So I want to give you each just like 20 seconds. Really try to keep it to 20. I'm going to just ask you a quick question, and I know it's not a question you can probably feel you can answer in 20, but give me the bullet point. And I'll start with you, Milton. Given where we're at, what is going to keep us? We are dividing right now. We're not coming together. I don't care what anybody says. We're dividing. I mean, there's still, we're dividing and splitting and dividing. We still got protests going on in Portland every day. We still got defund the police movements going on. The Black Lives Matter protests faded, but the movement hasn't. And, we've gotten to the point where, companies like, Twitter are taking words like blackout out of their programming language, because it literally, the word, blackout is a bad word, and it's an extreme that has nothing to do with the real problem. What do we do to start narrowing the divide? Because we're splitting right now. And that's.
I'll go back to what I said earlier, and I'm going to do it in less than 20 seconds. We have to learn to communicate with each other. And right now, we don't know how to do it.
So we got to learn. All right, appreciate that. Learn to communicate, and we don't know how. So we better figure out how. Mike, you've had 20 years, 20 years as a police officer in one of the toughest cities. You've seen a lot. I don't know if you feel we're going backwards, forwards. Are we going backwards or forwards? And if we're going backwards, what's going to take us forwards?
Well, we got to quit straining at gnats and swallowing camels. We sit there and strain at ideas that are political correctness. Is saying blackout something offensive? Certainly not. Please, let's get to the things that really matter. Not getting little things that are so far afield.
Right.
I think we need love more and communicate more. I think Milton hit it right on the head. Communicate. But I don't think accentuating differences is going to be helpful for anybody. I think it's finding common ground.
All right, common ground. Again, though, and Mike, common ground, but I think that's easy to say, and I call for it all the time, but how do we find common ground? I'm sure you have an answer for this. With such a divide, with such a divided environment where people literally, you can't say there's black violence. As a cop, there's a lot of black on black violence in inner city neighborhoods, and it's almost like you can't put a spotlight on that right now because that's somehow being anti-black.
Well, no, I think let me respond to that real quick, okay? Yeah, I grew up in Inglewood, which President Trump, Inglewood in Chicago, which President Trump on a regular basis wants to tell people is the most dangerous place in America, okay? To me, it's just home, okay? And I can tell you, yes, is there black on black crime? Yes, but guess what? Most white people are murdered by other white people because murder is kind of a personal thing, okay? Most young black males are murdered by young black males. Most young white males are murdered by young white males. Typically someone they know, okay? And so I think, and here's the thing, here's the big difference though, okay? I was afraid growing up in my neighborhood of the gangs in my neighborhood, okay? And it's bad enough I had to be afraid of the gangs, but then I shouldn't be afraid to call the cops who are supposed to help me be protected from the gangs.
And you were afraid of both?
Yeah.
Okay, Milton, thank you for that. Mike, I'm going to let you get a word in on that because you were a cop and you dealt in some of those neighborhoods. Quick response to what Milton just said.
Milton's absolutely right. But what I would add to that is we got, as a police officer, I always felt we got more support in the south end of Los Angeles than we did anywhere else. Why? Because they knew, as bad as things might get, it was always worse if the cops weren't there.
Exactly.
And believe there are some absolutely lovely, wonderful people in the South Los Angeles, South Central Los Angeles, and we tend to just paint the whole thing with one paintbrush. And again, it's because we're lazy. We're not strong enough to go south and find all those good people in Los Angeles.
Right. All right, you guys, listen, thank you. Great point to all of you. Thank you so much for jumping in.
What happened to my 20 seconds?
Okay, Jim, sorry. I thought you were lost on the beach. You get 20 seconds, Jim. You know
Okay.
what, Jim? You have white privilege. You know, what do you think you got to get 20 seconds to?
I would like 25. I would like 25, please.
Go, 25 seconds. Go, go, go.
Okay. So, I like Mike's comment. He didn't meet a black guy till he went to high school. My dad grew up in Omaha, Nebraska. Didn't meet a black guy till he was in the Air Force. I say to everybody on the environmental side that wants to get rid of a straw and everybody else that wants to solve white privilege, you don't have a seat at the table unless you go out and you do something real. Boots on the ground. Go out and adopt a kid. Go out and coach football. Go out and tutor somebody. Go out and make friends. Go out and, start a business with somebody of another color. And then when we start to understand each other, we can start to solve these. We'll have mutual trust and we'll actually make progress. But right now, it's just an absolute shit show because everyone's sitting there posting their, black page on Facebook and not drinking from a straw and pretending like they've done something. And the exact opposite is true. So I think everyone just needs to go out, put their money where their mouth is, and be a part of the solution. Get to know each other, get to see that we're all the same, and then we sit down and have a conversation in 5 or 10 years.
All right. Well, listen, and that was over 25 seconds, but it was really well said. I want to first thank everybody who came on and shared your thoughts. All you guys, really appreciate it. And Jim, that last point, I couldn't agree more. And I think where we're coming to and where I want to leave this tonight is basically kind of tipping off of what Jim just said. And by the way, that conversation between Mike, an ex-cop, and Milton, who's a coach and a speaker and worked with the FBI, does diversity training. Both of you guys were a little older. I want to get some younger black and white voices on hopefully next week, who will join in our conversation as well. If you're out there and you're younger, want to hear your voice on it, because I think there's a generational perspective that's important. And it is the next generation that's going to do it. Race is seen very differently between generations. My generation, and I'm the end of Gen X, and the generation before me, the baby boomers, have a very different experience with race than you millennials do. And our interactions are very different. And I'll leave it with a story. When I was at the Black Lives Matter protest, one of them, I talked to the cops, I talked to the protesters, I was right in the middle of the whole thing. And a black couple said to me, I have some video of it. It's hard to hear because there's so much noise with thousands of people. But they talked about how they had kids from different relationships and how his daughter, when she was a little kid, in like 7, 8 years old, whatever it was, got uninvited to a birthday party because the mother didn't want a black girl coming. And I was like, wow, it became a whole deal with the school, and they had a whole parent-teacher conference thing. Point of the story was the dad said, today my daughter and that girl are best friends. And I do think that's a sort of a metaphor for, if that's the right word, for how we are going forward. The next generation, the millennials and Gen Z will have a different experience with race. They automatically are more inclusive inherently. Same with sex. Men and women, they don't look at it. The 20-somethings don't look at sexism the same way they do. Most 20-something women I know don't feel like they're disadvantaged around guys. Don't feel like they have to be treated as a woman or honored as a woman. They're just an equal. And hopefully we get to that in race. But we don't get to that in race if we keep locking into the divide. And the conversation today shows me, at least, how much there's still to work out, because stuff Milton was saying about the way blacks were treated historically, that can't get erased. You can tear down every statue you want. It will not erase that legacy. You can't erase the fact that happened. You can't erase that we had Jim Crow laws in the 50s. You can't erase that we had prominent U.S. senators in the 1960s who were hardcore racists. You can't erase the fact that Lyndon Johnson was a hardcore racist and he did a lot of civil rights stuff. You can't erase that. But we have to build on it, and it's a tricky thing to build on something that was so painful. So the question, how do we do that, is a big one, and one we're all going to have to answer. And I think what everybody said today was really valuable. And I think my last thought on this really is, it's easy to talk about it. It's easy. I've worked in inner city communities. I've been a mentor. I've worked with anti-gang groups. I've spent time doing it. And Jim's right. It's easy to post. It's easy to say I'm on board until it costs you something. And even beyond that, are you investing the time and the effort in these communities? Are you making an effort to get to know the people who aren't you, who aren't your color, aren't your race, aren't your economic status? And are you doing something to help create change in those communities? Or are you just posting a thing that says, I'm sorry I'm being white? Because I don't think most people in those impoverished communities give an F that you're white and sorry for being white. If you want to make change, you got to do something. I'm Rob Nelson. This has been Rob Nelson Live. Thanks for watching. Thanks for participating. Thanks for being part of it. Thanks, Bruce, for producing a great show. We'll see y'all on Friday.